Hello and welcome to the Film Angle. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kris.
And we are back this week with the second half of our year in review of 2022. We went through our 10 to 6 films last week, which were, my 10 was Everything Everywhere All at Once. My 9 was Prey. My 8 was Black Panther Wakanda Forever. My 7 was The Black Phone. And my 6th favourite film of the year was Athena.
Mm-hmm. My number 10 was We Met in Virtual Reality. Number 9 was Pinocchio by Guillermo del Toro, not the other one. Number 8 was Barbarian. Number 7, Banshees of Inisherin. And number 6 was The Worst Person in the World. Time to get really, really enthusiastic now, right? Top 5.
Absolutely. Our top 5 favourite films of the year. Shall we just jump straight into it, Kris?
I think we should.
Absolutely.
I'll kick it off here. This is a movie that I feel like is already got a huge cult following that people are just going to be rewatching at parties for eternity now. It's so it is Indian language epic called RRR, or which kind of stands for Rise, Roar, Revolt. It's kind of a fictional history of these two legendary revolutionaries as they journey away from home before fighting for their country in the 1920s. And it is absolutely off the wall, insane. Some of probably the best fight choreography, special effects I've seen in any film, let alone, just Indian cinema. This is such a bonkers hit of big Bollywood musical numbers and trains on fire and fighting tigers, and it is absolutely crazy. But it's also got this really good central relationship between the two characters who become the ultimate bros. It's the ultimate bromance movie. You've probably heard a lot of people saying, where these two people who are kind of represent two elements. One represents water, one represents fire, and they come together. And they're originally, one of them is trying to infiltrate and usurp the other one. Unbeknownst to them, though, they actually become very close friends, and it becomes a really like a dynamic of whether to, really trust and go with your heart and be with your brother, or do you go with fascists, the British coming into the country trying to colonize and try to do what they want you to do, or do you fight for the people? And it becomes a real fist bumping movie, like you were mentioning last week with Athena. Rise, Roar, Revolt was for me. It is just so fun. I mean, like, all Bollywood movies are like 10 hours long, right? It's just a thing. They all have to be like 3 hours minimum. That's a small movie if you're 3 hours long. This clocks in 187 minutes, so just over the 3 hour mark, and it feels like a 2 hour movie. It is just like from start to finish a rip roaring ride where you're just not let up. You're buckling up the whole way over and you're laughing out loud. You're having so much fun, but you're not laughing because it's silly, but you're laughing because you're like, holy shit, like what the hell are they doing on screen here? This is incredible. I've never seen anything like this. You have an opening scene where our main character is by himself. They are guarding like a small building owned by the British, and there are thousands of mobs of people protesting, trying to shake down, break the gates. And this one guy is charged. He goes into the crowd and beats the shit out of every single person in the crowd with just a nightstick, and is this one of the best crowd control well shot action scenes ever, where you can just see how well this guy can fight, and you're like, I would not mess with him. And it is the genius behind it is incredible. Like Spielberg couldn't do crowd control this good. It is it is an incredible film. I've spoken to you privately about this movie before, and I would relish the opportunity if we find the 3 hours to watch it someday, to watch it, because you'll have a great time.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? I've been really bad and I haven't caught up with this film despite the amount of kind of praise I've heard about it. And part of that is kind of obviously that, the 3 hour mark is really difficult, but also that kind of, the bias towards a Western film. I've not seen a Bollywood film that I haven't enjoyed. To be fair, I've not seen many Bollywood films, but sometimes to be like a 3 hour film with songs and dance. and
Yeah.
part of me is like, that sounds amazing, but the other part of me is like, I'd rather check on something else right now. And I feel really, really bad about that.
I would not let that turn you away. It is actually
No,
a
I
real switch your
know.
brain off movie, despite being
Do you know,
subtitled.
I feel like an awful person for not having caught up with it yet because of the praise heaped on it. When you and I can figure out time to go watch Avatar 2 in the cinemas, I
That
should
is
be able to
true.
find
That is true.
time for RRR. Yeah, no, it's one of those films that I keep kicking myself that I haven't seen yet. I mean, it's made your top 5, so I'm gonna have to see it. Like, there's
Mhm.
no, every film. We've seen a lot of films this year. Any film that makes it this far up a list is going to be worth watching. So
Well, if it helps you a little bit more, it's the only movie this year where I actively go back weekly and watch a scene on YouTube, just to cheer me up.
yeah,
So it's that good, and it's on Netflix, so you can watch
yeah,
anytime. So
exactly. No, that's yeah. I really need to catch up with that one, and you're making me feel even worse
I'm
about
trying. I'm
not
trying.
having done so already.
What's your number 5, Alex?
My number 5 is The Northman, directed by Robert Eggers, who
Hmm.
did The Witch and The Lighthouse. And here it feels like he was given 150 million by a studio. I can't remember what studio, to kind of make this big Viking uh, historical epic, but at the same time, really kind of delve deep into the kind of Nordic Viking lore and gods and all the kind of mythology that comes with that.
Hmm.
It's a film that constantly battles between wanting to be this kind of big blockbuster epic, but also this kind of arty lore film all at the same
Hmm.
time. Like, it almost gets bogged down in the details at times, not in a way that ever kind of is against it.
I think I heard a crew member was interviewed, and they said that he's very obsessive over the details that don't even get noticed in the movie. Like he would not necessarily stress out, but he was for him to kind of want the movie to go forward as well as possible. Like even the engraving on a boat that you wouldn't see unless the camera was right up to it. He had to make sure that like that was as accurate as possible to kind of make him sleep at night. He's yeah, and the detail, like you're right, it's on here on display.
Absolutely, and it's just one of those films where it's like it's violent and gritty and brutal, and it ends with a climactic
Oh yeah.
fight scene of two men in the nude in the middle of a volcano
Hmm.
fighting
Hmm.
it out for revenge.
Yeah,
And I mean, how can you not love a film that
yeah,
ends in that way? It's a brilliant, brilliant time. I was so happy I got to see this at the cinema. The numbers for it kind of felt like maybe not a lot of people did catch it at the cinema. I haven't watched it since. I do wonder how well it'll play back on a TV.
yeah.
But man, like, it felt like quite the epic watching it in the cinema.
And absolutely, and especially if you followed Eggers as a filmmaker, I'm a really like The Witch is one of my favorite films of 2015, and The Lighthouse I thought was really strong, like thought provoking exercise as well. I would say Northman's really a strong film. I really enjoy it. It's made my top 20 of this year to make my top 10. But it is something I really, really enjoy. And the performances, I love all the mythical ethos and everything, all the Viking Norse mythology kind of laced in this movie. It's also got Bjork playing a witch for a scene,
Mm.
so it kind of sold me there. And Ethan Hawke plays dad, so you've only got to put people like that in the movie, and I'm there to watch it.
It's quite
Um,
the cast, isn't it? With
it is quite a cast.
Willem Dafoe in there, Nicole Kidman in probably one of her best roles
Oh,
in
she's great.
years.
Yeah,
I'd
she's
say she
amazing.
was absolutely brilliant. Anya Taylor Joy, who's constantly just
Yeah,
probably one
working
of the
with great people.
most kind of hardworking actresses out there right now. Really, really excited whenever she appears in anything at the
Hmm.
moment.
Absolutely. So great pick, Alex. That goes to my number 4. I think this is a movie you haven't seen either. This was one of the first movies I had seen on the big screen this year. It is a Japanese animated film called Belle. Again, probably not well known to major audiences, but I think it's already garnered a real strong cult following. I actually bought an anime encyclopedia book earlier this year, and it already has it as an entry in it as a reviewed and kind of really well mentioned movie. It is probably the most ambitious um, piece of Japanese animation I've ever seen. The scale, I saw this on an IMAX screen.
Mm.
I was lucky enough that I had a one night showing and made it for that, and it absolutely blew me out of the water as a pure experience that transports you and takes you to another world. It's kind of related to my number 10 pick that we mentioned last week, and we met in virtual reality, where this is set in a world where we are now connected to our mobile phones through an app called You. And in the app you can create your own avatar and you can completely live within this world in a VR setting and be whoever you want to be. And this we follow a young 17-year-old high school student who's living in rural Japan with her father. She's wounded sort of by the loss of her mother, who passed away years ago trying to save another child in a river when she was a little girl. And she's kind of has this sort of looming over her all the time. And she struggles to connect with people in school. And she finds this platform called You and joins it and becomes this character called Belle, and where she can sort of, it sounds a bit cheesy, but she becomes kind of a Euro star. She's a singer, she's a performer, and people connect with her in this avatar. This avatar looks very different to what she looks like in real life. She's got this sort of long, beautiful pink hair, and she wears these outrageous outfits, and she makes like Eurovision winners type songs that people connect with, and she amasses millions of followers online. She then comes into contact with a dragon like figure who is hated by everybody on this platform. Comes in, causes disruption, and everybody tries to hunt him down and get rid of him from the platform. And she forms a connection. It's kind of tied to Beauty and the Beast in that way, where it's sort of a reimagining of that story, hence why it's called Belle with an E. And they form a really strong connection, and she tries to puzzle out who this person is in real life and tries to investigate and get to the bottom of who the dragon is. And it kind of taps into really some hard hitting issues. Domestic parental abuse is in here. Learning to be yourself, just like we met in virtual reality, had those sort of things on its mind. And I think it's sort of one of the most beautiful sort of realizations of what a metaverse could end up looking like. And to be honest, I was absorbed in this world, and I kind of want to live there. It was that well realized, and it is an absolutely epic. One of the most transportive cinema going experiences I've had for some time.
Yes, I remember you bigging this one up a while ago, and really try to get me to see it. I still haven't seen it, and I will. You are selling it. You are selling. Like I said, it's in your top 5. I gotta see it now. I gotta see it. But
Oh, and I actively the soundtrack. There's it's not really a musical. There are about 3-4 songs in this movie, but all of them are absolutely belters as well. They It shows you how popular the music actually is in this movie. If you go to the Spotify profile for this movie, it has nearly 3/4 of a million monthly listeners just to the soundtrack. So it obviously has a big following, and people obviously are really engaging with it. And it has some moments that are just really like, it's very big on emotion. It's big swings. I feel like it's just like, I think that's Japanese animation in general. It tends to deal with bigger emotions that are not necessarily something that we do over in the West. We tend to kind of refine our feelings a little bit more. Which is something I really appreciate here. And in this world, it makes sense, especially when we're trying to filter ourselves down in a world that isn't our own. We're outside of reality. We're putting ourselves into a different reality, like a fantasy version. So it makes sense that all those emotions are really big. And it's really beautiful. And it's about seeing the best in people. And it has probably reminds me of Your Name that came out in a few years ago. That had a really big sort of like last 20 minutes that really builds and like stirs you up inside. And it's impossible not to feel kind of emotional by the end of the movie.
Well, I absolutely love Your Name, so I mean that's probably the biggest selling point for me there. If it's anything like that,
I went for the low hanging fruit.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's an element of what as well, like probably the same way when I was going into Del Toro's Pinocchio. I was like, do I want to see Pinocchio again? I think there's an element here with that where it's like, I know Beauty and the Beast. I know this is reimagined, but can I be asked with that story again? But I imagine I'll be proven as wrong as I was with Del Toro's Pinocchio. That like
Yeah,
no, it's so refreshing that it's unlike
yeah.
the story you know.
The Beauty and the Beast is more an element of the story.
Okay.
It's more like a 10%. It's more like
Ah,
borrowing that part, and it's the rest of it is its own thing. So
okay.
that's it.
Interesting. I will add it to my list and I will get it watched as soon as possible.
I'm sure you will. So, what made your number four then, Alex?
My number 4 favorite film of the year was The Batman.
Mm-hmm.
The Batman.
Like, I'm hearing the soundtrack in my ear right now as you're.
Oh, a brilliant kind of musical motif to kind of go along. And again, it's another one of those. It feels like a bit of an epic, but at the same time, it's quite a small Gotham centric story.
Mm,
It almost feels like this could be David Fincher's Batman. But I think
yeah.
my favorite thing about this was that I think the trailers almost felt like, yeah, we're going to do the realism thing again and we're going down the Christopher Nolan route. And I think there was an element of like, really? Do we have to? But then Matt Reeves has created this highly stylized world, this rainy, grimy, grungy Gotham,
Hmm.
and everything in this world works so well together. It's almost unlike any Batman you've seen, but at the same time, you feel the Batman from the comics. You feel the world around him, and it's this incredible sandbox. It feels like the most well thought out comic book movie we've had in a long time. Like there was real intent to make something truly,
Hmm.
truly unique and interesting here. Even with the casting of somebody like Robert Pattinson as the main role. I mean, this is very much a Batman film. He rarely gets out of that costume.
Hmm.
This is a detective, and he's a detective in a bat suit, and
Strips
you
it
know,
down almost to the character's origins, and it's sort of when it used to just be like Batman and Commissioner Gordon working out cases, and it kind of strips it back to those sort of cat and mouse sort of days.
absolutely, it's very genre specific. It kind
Hmm.
of it just hits all the right points, and like you said, that roaring, thunderous soundtrack with the motif behind it every
Yeah.
time Batman appears, and he appears a lot. It's a long ass film, but yeah, I just everything about this works so well. Even if you took the Batman element away, it would be this brilliant kind of detective noir story. But I must say, the film grabs you from its opening 5 to 10 minutes straight away, as you get this kind of emo monologue from Robert
Yeah,
Pattinson as
set
he
to
describes how the kind of idea of the Batman works, and nobody's really sure if he's real. His
yeah,
light lights up the sky in Gotham,
with an
you know,
angsty Nirvana track in the
yeah, and you
background.
get all these different criminals who are kind of like scared of the shadows just in case he's there. And
Hmm.
that for me straight away solidified that like Matt Reeves knows what he's doing. He knows Batman, and this is going to be um a really, really great film. And it delivered. It delivered in a way that I didn't think we'd see a Batman film that could hold a flame to the Nolan Dark Knight. And as it doesn't top it, but
Hmm.
it holds a flame to it, and I was really impressed by just how good this kind of reboot of the character was.
It's a very brave move as well, considering how recent in our minds the Nolan trilogy is and how beloved it is. You know,
Mm,
it takes it's a big step to kind of do something, and they did something interesting where they did their own thing. They did something completely different, where they were both honoring the origins of the character and really kind of pushing it in a sort of dystopian. Like you said, it almost feels like a David Fincher slash Denis Villeneuve sort of
mm,
um, feeling that has that dystopian sort of grim dark look at Gotham that I don't think we've had as much in live action versions. I mean, perhaps Tim Burton's iteration was a bit more
yeah.
like that, but Nolan's was a bit more clean and crisp. So no, this was definitely really really interesting movie. I loved it a bit. I loved the relationship between him and Zoe Kravitz. yeah, Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz had this really like strong sexual chemistry on screen together, that I thought was really kind of cool. I wasn't really expecting that from a movie like this. I think it's really cool to have something like that, and there's something teased there and bubbling for future movies too. So I would really love to see these two on screen again.
Absolutely, and the one element we haven't discussed, but is probably one of its best elements, is the Colin Farrell penguin.
Yeah,
Colin
yeah.
Farrell under layers and layers of
He's had a
makeup,
great year. He's had a great
and
year.
surprisingly makes the fat suit work in a really great way. Yeah, completely disappears into that character. But yeah, between this and the Banshees of Inisherin,
And
yeah,
after Yang.
after of course, of course. Yeah, he's had a brilliant year. He's
Hmm.
such a good actor. I love
He
him. I
is.
love him.
Yeah.
Get on to your number 3, Chris.
My number 3 is a movie that I never thought would make my top 10 of of the year. Um, it is Top Gun Maverick.
Mm,
Tom Cruise. I had an absolute whale of a time watching this movie. I've still only seen it once, but I need to revisit it. But the one time I went to see it in IMAX was enough to leave such a strong impression that I couldn't stop thinking about the movie for weeks. It is by no means perfect. It is contrived, like any Tom Cruise blockbuster movie is, but it does that thing where we've been getting recently, where it just takes an original source material that's, fun but kind of problematic by its nature and of its time, and turns it and morphs it into a better, more near perfect movie, like a version of itself. And it does, Tom Cruise's continual pursuit of death defying special effects and stunts comes through here, where it's just, we've got a streamlined simple story that is completely just fueled by some of the most intense scenes with a great with a great sort of reimagining of the Top Gun original score and music. And it's just a mixture of sight and sound that stirs up feelings and makes you want to fist bump the air. And by the end of the movie, you're just like, the emotions that are stirred up just by the pure action scenes is crazy.
I will skip ahead a little bit here, Chris, and just because it's not far off in my list either. Top Gun Maverick is my number 2 film of the year, and I want to chat about it
Right.
with you now because I have that same kind of excitement about it. I also didn't think it would make my top 10, but it almost feels like they gambled on delaying this and delaying this throughout the pandemic. And they were supposed to come out like 2 years ago. And thank God they waited, because seeing it on the big screen,
Mm,
with a lot of it somehow shot practically in actual fighter jets, um, is just kind of, it's cinema at its most breathtaking. As
mm.
Tom Cruise, like you said, always trying to find the best way to kill himself on screen, is really kind of like pushing the limits of what you can capture in camera. And yeah, I mean, not only is it thrilling and exciting as this kind of visual spectacle, it's got a lot of heart, and it really is. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
what if the first Top Gun movie, but it was actually good. I'm sorry to my dad, because that's his favorite film of all time, but Top Gun 1's okay. Top Gun 2 is brilliant, and I got really emotional watching it as well. And I was really happy to share that experience with my dad in the cinema as well, because it's nostalgia bait, but it also kind of like gets that out the way pretty early on,
Yeah.
and then just says, come on a ride with us, you're going to be absolutely thrilled.
Oh yeah, from the first moments of the movie, you're in for a good time. And it reminded me, I think we spoke about this earlier on in the year. It reminded us a lot of the opening scene for Damien Chazelle's First Man, where
Hmm.
it was a real sort of like, this is what to expect from this movie, a proper white knuckling experience of seeing where we're going to go and like how the action scenes are going to be set
Yeah,
out.
but with thought behind
Mhm.
character development and
Yes.
story and kind of relationships. Yeah, I mean, it's as well as thrilling, it's quite a moving film, and I think there's a lot of stuff in the third act where it comes together and really kind of made me,
Oh yeah,
I don't
and
know,
you care about
tear
every
up.
single member of the team as
Mm,
well, where you just don't want anyone to go. And it just takes, it does that good thing. There's nothing wrong with convention if you can find a way to funnel it down and make it really really work. and I'm okay with feeling manipulated from time to
Oh yeah.
time. You know, that's kind of what movies do. They all have the intention to make you feel something, and this one did it in a really well, in a amazing way. I like, you know, I get so excited for anytime Tom Cruise comes on screen. I think we were talking about this earlier, that he's the only real movie star left, and the one that really makes you want to go to see a movie just on his appearance alone. Plus, you married this with a franchise called Top Gun, which is so, you know, iconic.
Yeah.
It's no wonder why it was one of the biggest hits of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I was surprised at just how good it was. Really, um, I always knew those action flight scenes were going to be excellent, but I wasn't expecting everything else to be stripped down to the kind of rawest elements
Mm.
and really take me on quite a ride of a story. Yeah, I would not have guessed it'd be my number two film of the year. And I know I've skipped ahead there, but I'll jump onto my number three now. My number three film, which I'll only go into slightly as well, is After Sun,
Mm.
which is a pretty late film into the year, but one of those kind of surprise hits that I don't know, just kind of left me in a world of thought and memories and sadness. And it's probably one of the most moving films of the year.
Mm.
But I got a feeling I might dive deeper into my number three film with you later on, Chris.
Okay, okay. So want to skip? You were wanting to skip ahead to number two? Is that what you're saying?
Why don't you share with us your number two film of the year?
My number two film you've already mentioned is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah, I was completely on board with the hype of this movie. I just thought it was so interesting that we could have a small, well, albeit small studio create such an epic and such a love letter to cinema. There is, you know, if you're really a true fan of film and all its genres and are well versed, there's going to be so much in here that you're going to like. Even things that are split second, blinking you miss it stuff. There is so much to unpack from this movie on a visual level alone. And then you get down to the story, like you mentioned, the family dynamics. It's all about how we generationally, how we relate to each other, our differences, and how we come together at the end and sort of recognize those differences and build upon them and grow. And it's such a touching story, and I think it's so helped by the amazing performances in it. Um, Michelle Yeoh is just absolutely steals the scene, steals every scene with her character Evelyn, with one of the best comeback side characters ever in Wayman Wine, played by Ki Kwan. He is really like he is on the comeback. He really is. I think everybody fell in love with him in this movie. He's probably my favorite performance in the movie as well, beside Jamie Lee Curtis, who also is a scene stealer in her own right and goes for it with a very non-vanity driven performance, we'll just say, which is really really cool. The daughter, played by Stephanie Su, is incredible too. The performance that they have is really the relationship she has with her mother Evelyn is so touching, and that's kind of the crux of this story is the relationship between the mother and daughter, and how the daughter becomes an unsuspecting overarching villain of the story, which is really fun when she switches tones into that villain, like cartoony character. It is so much fun, and she is having the time of her life. And yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be in love with this movie. It is a one of a kind film that begs to be watched over and over again, and I can't wait to watch over and over again. I need to buy this thing on 4K. It's that good. Yeah, and especially it's one of those things that's got so many nods to cinema that even as I explore my cinematic journey, I could probably come back to this movie and find more things in there that I had not noticed before. So that's the treat of this thing.
I think as well, it's just like when you think about how it has a tenth of the budget of like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of
Yeah,
Madness, and the
yes.
places it goes, and the kind of visuals it comes up with, it really is kind of like independent filmmaking at its finest. You're like, how did they even
Oh yeah.
do this?
The amount of
Um,
costumes in this movie alone, just for like throwaway millisecond shots or sets or anything, it's crazy.
how do you even like plot this? How do you even go about structuring how to film this? I mean, it's like it's an achievement in itself. It's yeah, obviously I've spoken about it as well. It's my number 10 film. Yeah, it's a brilliant little film that yeah has clearly taken the world by storm this year. I do wonder. Do you think it's going to be a contender at the Oscars this year, Chris? There's so much love behind it. Do you think it
There's a
might
lot of
be one of
love.
those ones that like keeps
The momentum.
going into the award season?
I would love it to have a real presence at the Oscars. Unfortunately, historically, the Oscars always has suffered from recency bias. That's why a lot of, prestige in inverted commas movies are kind of slotted for January, February releases because that's when it's going to be fresh in everybody's mind. I hope, because it's a bit of a weird year in terms of where we are as a planet. I think there is possibility for traction from earlier releases of the movie of the year to come forward. I think Top Gun Maverick is also a victim of being earlier in the year, but also has legs to go forward too. So, this could be a different year, and I would love this movie to have a presence there for sure.
Well, I kind of messed up the list a bit by speaking about my number 2 already, which was Top Gun Maverick.
Not at all.
So I don't know if there's much more to add than just it's a brilliant time. We've already chatted about it, but I kind of wanted you to go into your number 1 now, Chris, so we can chat about that because it's a film that we both love.
Yeah. It's really hard. I don't want to stem too much into the realm of hyperbole because it's impossible not to with this movie because it absolutely bowled me away. And it is Charlotte Wells' debut film, if you can believe it. It's her debut film, After Sun.
Mm.
Um, I managed to see it a few weeks ago in the cinema. Again, later in the film year. Um, so you kind of think your list is wrapped up by then, and then this movie comes along and makes it straight to my number 1, and it's not without thought. There's no recency bias involved there. I had to really really think, but it was just one of those movies for at least the 2 weeks following after seeing it. It was circling in my mind, not just like one or two scenes. It was the whole combination of everything. It was like playing like a collage in my mind, and the moments that really spoke to me and made me question, when I was a kid, like one of the main characters here, um, you know, made me kind of reassess thoughts and feelings I had that were sort of unexplored. So that's the potential that this movie has, and I think it's a real film that depends on what you bring to it. I think no matter what, you
Mm.
will find something to take away that is emotionally cathartic or heartbreaking. But no matter what your experience is, you're going to have something. There's going to be one scene in this movie that made you tear up that is going to be different to the person sitting next to you. They're going to have another
Yeah.
scene that hit them really hard, and that's the real power here. There's not a single shot sort of to waste in this sort of lean feeling 90 to 100 minute movie. It's sort of a semi autobiography, isn't it? It's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of based on um a holiday that this main character called Sophie. She reflects on a holiday that she had, this sort of private melancholy that she took this holiday with her father 20 years ago in Turkey. It's set in the late 90s. Memories start to kind of come back into the forefront. Half the movie is a mixture of video found footage that she shot during the holiday, and the rest of it is shot like a traditional film. And so it's about her trying to fill in the gaps of those memories and what really happened during that holiday, that to understand her father and be closer to her father more. And it's something that it's very ambiguous about what the events are in the movie. There's obviously, her dad is obviously dealing with some sort of depression that he
Mm.
is trying to mask from his daughter. And we are seeing it through her POV. And it is just one of the most heartbreaking movies I've seen in some time. I mean, Paul Mescal is, you know, I'm afraid he won't get an Oscar nomination for Best Actor, but not only should he get it, he should win it, because it is just a performance that is so focused, so difficult, because this movie is all about small moments.
Yes.
There's no big hitters, there's no big Oscar speeches here. It is just purely done on body language and where the camera is and how Charlotte Wells beautifully constructs the scenes. It feels like a movie that's just so personal that you're invading on its space.
I
And
know.
I was, I was walking still to my car at the end of the movie, long after the credits had rolled, and my jaw was quivering. Still, I was struggling to get my breath back because I thought it was just such a hard hitting masterpiece, and it's a debut. It's a first film. I can't believe it. It feels like someone who has been mastering the craft for so long. It is just, it's devoid of any fat. It's just pure, untapped, cinematic potential. I cannot wait to see what she makes next.
Yeah, and it's mad just how much it affects you on an emotional level. Considering, like you said, the ambiguity of the story itself. It never says something really bad
Yeah.
happens. This is it. You should feel sad. You put the pieces together like a puzzle. In the same way that the main character is, it really puts you in the shoes of older Sophie looking back at these, at this footage and piecing together the kind of behind the scenes of when the camera wasn't rolling and what her father was going through and all this kind of stuff. It's never explicitly said that something's gone bad, but you know it has,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of I just was kind of hit by the just natural realness of the story of the relationship between father and daughter, um, how how it really did feel like you were almost watching a documentary at times of
Mm-hmm.
these two characters, but at the same time kind of relating, like it's set in like 90s, is it Turkey, I think,
Yeah, the
but it
all-inclusive holidays that we all as kids were up at the bars getting free cokes and everything. Like that stuff is so
absolutely, it
relatable.
feels like
Yeah.
the UK holiday nostalgia film. It's really, really
Yeah.
strange at the same time. It feels so kind of, I don't know, hard hitting and close to home, and it's really interesting. I left the film being like, oh, that was good. I yeah, it was quite an emotional ride, and then you keep thinking about it, and I
Esters.
almost like teared up more thinking about the film than I did during the actual film. And that's
Hmm.
kind of why I didn't want to touch on it too much when I put it in my number 3 spot, because I think the best conversation I had was with you when we were in a bar with our partners. Before we went to see Avatar 2, and it was almost like, did somebody get the microphones, because like we were just discussing the film, having both seen it relatively recently,
Yeah.
and it was just like, man,
I,
this film has really affected me in a really special way, that it's almost quite hard to articulate at times what it is, but
mhm.
it's like you said, it's almost like a film where everybody brings their own baggage to it, and takes away a different thing.
And I think it does so well at making those two, the father and daughter relationship, just so earned, and you really invest in it because the chemistry between them two is really real, and there's history behind it too. And I think Charlotte Wells made them actually go on holiday together before they shot, so that they had time to kind of spend together and form a relationship
Mm,
before actually shooting the movie. So that, I think that always helps. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and also, its use of music is very nostalgic too, and aids, and is very deliberate in its use in terms of like what the lyrics in each song kind of contains and relates to the moment in a very, not in a corny way, in a way that's sort of like subconsciously involved. It has the final scene. I think everybody would agree is the heavy hitter. It's where everything
mm.
comes to a head, and it's the most devastating use of, would you believe it, Queen and David Bowie's Under Pressure you'll you'll ever hear. I mean,
Never
I like,
listen to it the same way
never
again.
listen to it the same way again. I'll just think about that last scene, and the yearning that's in that scene. That absolutely, I think it's just the biggest scene of yearning and trying to reach out to somebody I have
Mhm.
seen some time, and it's just so well done. I mean, and then the credits roll, and you're like, you're gonna do that. You're gonna do that to me. You're just gonna leave me like a piece of like a wreck here. That's what the movie leaves you like.
I know, and those endings are so difficult to get, and I think that you find that a lot with like small independent films where the premise and the idea is so interesting, but the
And
ending
they just end.
doesn't always capture the whole film. But here, the ending is the strongest element, and like sucker punches you in the stomach, um,
Oh yeah.
in a way that I really wasn't ready for, but at the same time, it was quite. cathartic in a
Yeah.
strange way.
I'm shaking thinking about it now. I'm shaking.
It is one of those films. I think the more you kind of discuss it, the more it just conjures up those memories.
Hmm.
I've been more emotional talking about this film than watching it. It's a unique piece of cinema that easily could have made it as my number one as well. That's the funny thing about these lists. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't know how to kind of
If I say one
conjure them
thing,
together at times.
all 9 other mentions on my list could have been swapped with each other at any time. After Sun was the only one that was concrete. That just really, it was just the one that really kind of hit home and reminds me. It's that one film a year that we always get that reminds you why you're turning up to the cinema in the first place and why you love film.
That's interesting because if you would allow me to delve into my number one, it has been my number one film of the year for a long time as well, for very similar reasons. I think this film actually probably got more of a visceral reaction at the time from me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a film that you've already mentioned as well. It's The Worst Person in the World, chronicling a almost second coming of age film from our main character, Julie. It's the late 20s into 30s. What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with like my job and my relationships, and how do I figure out the mess of my 20s and turning it into something in my 30s? And it kind of hit me quite close to home in that way of just trying to figure it out in your late 20s and how that feels. And it kind of knocked me in a way I wasn't expecting. It kind of hammers the point home at the end with a kind of terminally ill character, you know, basically saying no regrets, live your life, do all that kind of stuff. But it does it in a way that's not hammy or cheesy or anything like that. And it's probably one of the most kind of creative films of the year. These little story vignettes, almost like multiple short films kind of woven together, with kind of really unique visuals and interesting dialogue and a kind of standout moment, which we've probably all seen from the poster of the film, where time stops and Julie kind of runs towards her newfound relationship
Mm-hmm.
through the
Yeah.
streets of, I'm assuming, Oslo. Um, and it was kind of like there's no special effects. Apparently, they literally got people to stop in the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
streets to kind of get this incredible cinematic shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really just kind of like hit a nerve with me, and yeah, I was kind of just, it kind of scared me and kind of comforted me all at the same time. I'm not saying every issue Julie has is an issue I have, but it kind of conjured up the feelings of just trying to piece this life together.
Well.
And I think it really kind of, if I was to put 2022 into a film, I feel like Worst Person in
Mm.
the World is my 2022 in not an exact way, but in a kind of very metaphorical way, if that makes any sense.
No,
I think
that's
I think that's what the film does. It makes me ramble like I'm
yeah.
trying to figure it
That's what the
out,
best
and
movies do. Yeah.
it's just making me trying to philosophically dive deep, but at the same time making no sense at all.
So yeah, I completely agree with you on that sentiment. I think it's the power of some movies just to provoke something within yourself that sometimes is unexplored or kind of put away, because it's a side of yourself that you're not necessarily proud of for some reason. And I think I felt some similar traits with Julie as well, in terms of her personality, and sometimes her disconnect is something that is, it's not something in cinema you necessarily see a lot of. So whenever it actually finally comes up on screen and it's portrayed by a character such like her, um, it's you're confronting something you not usually have to confront, because you have to watch it for two plus hours. So yeah, that's fascinating, and also it's kind of nice in a way, because you feel like, right, okay, this is something I've not discussed with somebody, but now I'm watching it on screen. So there's people that feel the same. Then there's a unity to have there, and people are going to have that, people talking about it, and people having that same experience, and people are still, they're in the same position like you. They're in their late 20s, 30s. They're still trying to figure it out, and you're not alone. You're not you beat yourself up and think that you're behind everybody and everything's greener on the other side, but everybody's trying to figure out. And as this landscape kind of, our culture changes and morphs, it gets harder and harder, and it seems like the barriers and the goalposts for what age you should be doing things is changing too. We're always
Mm-hmm.
trying to like set ourselves to a standard of other people around her. Julie is like constantly, not vocally but internally, comparing herself to other situations, and people have developed families and homes, and she's like one yearning for that, and then when she gets a sample of it, is bored by it.
Yes.
And it's the inner hate about that too, and why do I feel like that, why am I such a, like the movie calls it, why am I such a bad person, the worst person in the world. So yeah, it's very confronting film.
Absolutely, and it is the kind of final film in the Oslo trilogy from, I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm probably butchering it here, but Joachim Trier.
Yeah, that's right.
And I watched it. They're not like connected in any way, but I watched his previous two films as well.
Yeah,
This is definitely the best, but it's worth a watch of all of them.
yeah,
But The Worst Person in the World is kind of definitely his masterpiece. Yeah, absolutely blown away by this film.
that's great, Alex. Well, that's kind of wraps up our list for 2022. It's time to start the new list for 23 already, and hopefully we'll have some more, a number one this year that we could both be as excited about as last year, because it's going to be pretty tough competition, I think.
Absolutely. We started a
But
podcast in 2022, dude.
oh man, it's crazy. I mean, did we start what, January, February, March? I can't remember.
Early Feb or mid Feb, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, we're coming up. We're coming up to our 1 year anniversary.
Get the birthday candles out. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. Shall we go through our 5 to 1 just to remind everybody
Yes, of
of
course.
our top 5 films? So my number 5 film was The Northman. My number 4 was The Batman. My number 3 film was After Sun. My number 2, Top Gun Maverick. And my number 1 film of 2022 was The Worst Person in the World.
Great picks. My number 5 was RRR. My number 4 was Belle. My number 3 pick was Top Gun Maverick. My number 2, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And my number 1 was After Sun.
Do you think if they had been released earlier, do you think The Fablemans or Babylon would have made a hit into your top 10? Difficult to theorize, isn't it?
All 2022, The Fablemans has been my most anticipated movie for the last year. So we'll see. There's a part of me that is very invested in the Spielberg story, and I'm a sucker for those sort of things. I love every actor that's in there. I'm really excited to explore that movie, and especially from the great responses that it's had. Giselle's, I am definitely very fascinated by, because I've heard this is all like excess.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is like his big sort of blank check movie, a 3+R epic set in 1920s Hollywood. What could go wrong tonally? But it'll be very interesting. You got big hitters like Margot Robbie, Brad Pitt, and even like looks like a Kermit cameo by Tobey Maguire.
Yeah. It's one of those ones as well. Like the trailer did nothing for me. Didn't it? Like I was just like, all right, another one of these films. But it's the response to the film in the States where
so divisive.
It's so divisive. But it seems to be the people who love it it, and the people who hate it really do hate it, and that makes me want to see it even more. Even though it's another 3-hour film. What's with all these long films? But yeah, I mean, Fableman's Spielberg, diving deep into his own kind of upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to see that. But obviously,
so does that mean that if they do, somehow make a list for next year, would it be this year's list, 2023s, or would it be a 22 list? That's the thing.
As I was saying at the
movie's fault that it
start,
misses out a 2-month period where it doesn't end up being on the list at all. That would be right.
Well, unfortunately, like the way I do the lists in my head, like Babylon
Yes.
and Fableman's, if they were to make a top 10, they'd have to make It'd have to be a revisited top 10 of
Mm,
2022.
okay.
I wouldn't include them in my 23. I know it's awful, and that's the sucky thing about the UK film release schedule.
Well, if it does make a top 10, I think Spielberg will do fine without us mentioning his
Yes,
movie.
I'm sure he'll be all right. I'm sure he'll be all right. Anyway, let's kind of finish off our bumper 2-part year in review
Mhm.
episodes. And I just want to say as well, thank you to everybody who has jumped on board the podcast with us and gives it a listen, and anybody who shared it with any of their friends and family. We really enjoy doing it, and can't wait to continue this podcast journey with you, Kris. Thank you for a great
You too, buddy.
2022.
Thank you. But for now, this has been the Film Angle. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year.
Actually, shouldn't say that because we had an episode before.
Oh yeah. Goodbye.